What was your favourite subject at school?
My favourite subject at school was maths.
History.
PE.
My favourite subject at school was English.
My favourite subject at school was PE.
Chemistry.
Woodwork.
My favourite subject was English.
So my favourite subject was arts.
Lunchtime.
Pretty much everyone here loves animals, but apparently not everyone else is so passionate about biology. When schools were closed in the first lockdown, we were concerned about the amount of learning children would miss out on. Science already gets squeezed to 1 hour a week at best if teachers are pushed for time, let alone when they're fighting on Zoom for children to stop sharing their pets for just 1 second to focus on fractions. No, just stop. Just 1 second, please. Thank you. Now, many parents aren't that confident teaching science, so we wondered if we could provide the resources to help guide them. Otherwise, we could see science learning falling by the wayside, and children trapped inside wouldn't receive any conservation education. We wanted to help with a home education programme. Now, I'm not too proud to admit we got a little bit overexcited by the prospect. This was Tilgate Bites, our daily home education programme. We planned an ambitious curriculum full of different topics: adaptations, habitats, classification, conservation, mini-beasts, evolution, and many more.
But we were brought crashing down back to earth by one problem. How could we convince teachers or parent educators to actually use our programme? It was going to be free and comprehensive, designed to cover all the primary school and natural science curriculum objectives, with all sorts of different activities. The kinds we had always wanted to make, but had never had the excuse to. How could we make parents or children want to use our resources? It had to be fun, it had to have a broad appeal, and most importantly, it had to be more than just science. We all know zoology is a fascinating subject, and a lot of our visitors are ready for us to convert them too. But online, we needed to make resources that people want to seek out and use.
We were confident we could attract parent educators and children with a passion for science, which is obviously our greatest knowledge base. But what about the people at the start of the video? They wouldn't want to use it. So we designed a cross-curricular programme, using videos to deliver science content, followed by science activities, and then cross-curricular activities from all across every classroom subject, from maths, English, phonics, history, geography, RE, PSHE, PE, music, art, drama, DT, and so on. Studies have shown that use of a second subject can enhance learning in a focal one, and we were hoping that would work for us too. Children who love science could practice their learning from other subjects, and children who are more wary of science could learn through their love of other subjects instead.
During the first lockdown, we adhered to a strict structure of science, video and activity, followed by a linked cross-curricular activity, with each topic lasting 1 to 2 weeks, with around 9 activities and a quiz for evaluation. As time went on, we started to notice anecdotally that the cross-curricular activities were proving surprisingly popular.
This allowed us to be creative. We wanted our activities to be as accessible and desirable to as many children as possible. Some children prefer practical activities, some written, some more directed, and some more self-led with more room for imagination.
Activity formats therefore ranged from games and projects to worksheets and writing templates, puzzles, maps, DT instructions, recipes, and design tasks, which were differentiated and scaffolded as appropriate.
The children might not necessarily have a passion for science, but that doesn't mean that they can't excel in other subjects. So we ensured that the children were challenged by extension activities. Traditional science activities like bug hunts, dissections, labelling life cycles or adaptations, and carrying out observations and experiments were followed up by more unusual cross-curricular activities. Learners wrote their own Rudyard Kipling Just So story when looking at adaptations, and researched how people survive in harsh habitats like deserts.
They built their own micro-habitats and checked into the Tilgate Bug Hotel. They consolidated the concept of classification by sorting fractions, decimals and percentages, created their own arty reptilian scales, and composed their own birdsong. This activity in particular exceeded all expectations and became one of our most downloaded resources, showing the appetite for these kind of resources. learners rounded numbers of legs and estimated bee colony numbers in our Mini Beast maths activity, and became detectives to solve a cockroach's murder. Could they use geography map skills to recreate the scene of the crime, forensics to eliminate suspects, and then present their evidence? In conservation, we looked at the maths behind creating reserves for tigers, storyboarded adverts for sustainable palm oil, looked at the historical fashion for feathered hats that founded the RSPB, and studied religious attitudes towards conservation. We graphed gestation lengths when looking at reproduction.
And when we looked at evolution, we got scared with dinosaurs in phonics, heard a story about pioneer Mary Anning, and wrote letters to Charles Darwin asking about attitudes at the time towards his views. Yep, that's me. Who doesn't love dressing up?
And finally, in our anatomy topic, we built muscle models, practiced dramatic movement and facial expressions, studied the mechanics of singing, and led an animal-themed 80s dance workout, which we considered forcing you to do as part of this video, but luckily for you, we're feeling merciful. Each topic also had its own additional arts and crafts activities to complement it, like making a toad habitat, a Mesozoic mosaic of a dinosaur, or sustainable beeswax wraps.
By using such a broad spectrum of subjects, we could appeal to as many people as possible and deliver education to those who might not otherwise have taken notice. In the third lockdown, we reran our topics with new activities. Knowing the appetite for cross-curricular activities, we tried to include as many of these as possible this time. The overall scope of the programme looked like this.
Although we did ask for topic quizzes to be sent back to us, and we offered a digital evaluation form as an alternative, sadly these evaluative methods were underused.
Instead, download figures served as a proxy to demonstrate the effectiveness of the programme, as consistent download figures would only be seen if resources were perceived to successfully deliver content.
We looked at which activities were successful and adjusted accordingly. At the end of the first lockdown, we created an evaluation survey to assess the effectiveness of the programme. Now, again, return of the downloaded forms was pretty low, but a free family entry prize draw managed to secure us 15 responders, which is a little bit under 10% of the families that were engaging. In total, we created 126 activities over the first and third lockdowns and saw 22,806 downloads of these during that time, giving an average of 181 downloads per activity. If we use these downloads as a proxy for people engaged, then we've got about 265 learners engaging in total potentially, because about half of our survey responders had 2 children taking part.
We know that the programme successfully delivered science objectives to children. 93% of responders felt that their child learnt something from the programme. We saw a sizable increase in download figures for the third lockdown activities compared to the first lockdown, reflecting increased engagement and so interest in nature.
70% of survey responders said that the cross-curricular style of the programme really appealed to them as an educator, and there were a couple of instances where the cross-curricular activities were more popular than a topic's pure science ones. This wasn't always the case. There were a couple of situations where we found that a fun and accessible sounding activity ended up being not as popular as we might have expected. For example, storyboarding an advert sounds like fun and ought to allow lots of space for being creative, but it was less than half as popular as the rest of the activities in the conservation topic. We reckon that's because it was storyboarding a sustainable palm oil advert and the content put them off. We saw a similar dip in our climate change experiment activity in our adaptations and habitats module. Seems it doesn't matter how fun a cross-curricular activity might be, sometimes it might just be too much and it might just put people off. In the third lockdown, we tried to remedy this and focus on more positive conservation issues, like the promotion of conservation by different religions and a PSHE activity looking at children's own attitudes to nature. Whilst we aimed to deliver science content, we also wanted to foster connections with nature. The popularity of the cross-curricular activities wasn't a problem because those also helped to foster positive feelings towards the natural world. Our survey showed that children did show increased and sustained connections with nature, particularly through play and through discussion. Both of those have been linked to increased positive attitudes towards nature long term, not just in those children, but also in their peers and in their families.
Some survey responders were local and others were international, demonstrating the international appeal and the capacity to expand our conservation education message far and wide. As Tilgate Bites has a broad appeal and is able to successfully deliver science content in an interesting way to audiences across primary age brackets, it presents a model for home education programmes and future content.
While our reach as a small collection is quite low, we've created our dedicated home education resources page, where parents or educators can browse by topic, intended age and by subject. Or they can look here on our YouTube channel, which we can use for delivering resources, including to schools. We've also maintained our audience on our specially created Education Facebook page, which we share new resources on regularly. Our recent Black Science Heroes suite of resources was deliberately designed to replicate our home education programme in design, with a range of styles of resource and classroom subjects throughout the week. We saw similar download figures to these as we did in the third lockdown, suggesting that people are still coming back for more. Parents found the format of the programme, with its science videos and science activities followed by cross-curricular activities, attractive and declared it successful at delivering science content. This suggests it represents a good model for future home education resources. Consistent download figures showed that parents continue to engage throughout the programme and they seem to return for the third lockdown too, showing its desirability. Parents do still seem to be reluctant to tackle more hard-hitting conservation issues. We saw that activities featuring such issues as sustainable palm oil weren't downloaded. That suggests that while home education can help deliver more positive connections to nature and positive conservation education, the onus is still on in-zoo education, such as talks and other informal education, and formal education to deliver anything more harder hitting. Obviously, we always aim for positive conservation messages anyway, but it's interesting to see this spelled out starkly in different download figures. 100% of survey responders cited the fact that the material came from a zoo as enhancing the learning. They said it was more reliable, it was more credible, and that the real-life context really brought it to life. Since parents seem to trust us with science content already, it makes sense to branch out into more cross-curricular stuff to really show conservation education in a wider context. Thank you.
Oh, I know, you're so gorgeous.
Remote connected to connectedness? Connectivity?
We had. Oh, it's the start of it.